Hi everyone, today we're going to be looking into 3 of the most disturbing family massacre cases with you. The first case we'll be looking at is the Candy family massacre. Try to imagine the absolute terror a 10-year-old boy would have experienced after waking up in the morning and coming out of his room, only to find everyone in his family dead. Everyone but him. His father, mother, and 3 older brothers are all lying in a pool of their blood. The story we'll be talking about today is so heartbreaking and frightening, and might leave you questioning if those whom you love the most are truly safe to be around.
At this point, I just wish the nightmare would be over. I wish it was all a bad dream, and that we would wake up and that they would still be here.
Jonathan Candy's family looked just like any other normal American family. Some people might even describe them as a fitting image for the all-American family next door. They were a family of 4 boys and 2 parents. Everything looked very normal in this family. No one would have ever expected anything strange was going on behind the closed doors of the Candy family's home.
I had to see it for myself. I kept asking Cooper to please snap and text Ethan, and has he seen Ethan today? Has he talked to him? And I was calling Lindsay, and I was messaging Dylan, and nobody would respond.
They were your all-American family. This is something, I mean, I could live 100,000 lifetimes and never expect this out of that.
I could have never imagined that ever in my whole entire life, you know? And I'm still in shock.
Even their neighbors who saw and interacted with them almost every day never would have suspected anything horrible was going on in the home of the Candy family, who lived at the end of the cul-de-sac. An interview with the couple back in 2022 about one of their favorite bakery in Yukon during one Discovering Oklahoma episode showed the couple to be a young, vibrant, and happy family.
I come here twice a week in the morning just for their breakfast burritos, which are by far anything better than you can get around here. I love the carrot cake. I don't eat a lot of sweets, even with my last name. But I love the carrot cake.
I like the cannoli. The cannoli are good.
It's a tragedy that they are all gone now, leaving just the youngest son. The darkest part of this story isn't even the fact that they were all murdered. It would have been most likely easier and less painful for everyone to understand if a dangerous and armed man, or someone who just really wanted to hurt the family, broke in during the middle of the night and murdered them in cold blood. But no, that was not the case. The darkest part of this story is that the person who killed the wife and 3 children and also turned to kill himself is Jonathan Candy, and not any other person. The man who was meant to be the husband and father of the wife and children, and who was meant to support, love, and care for them, the same man that these people looked up to for safety, is the same very person who took away their lives.
Him and his kids seemed like they always got along. He just was just a family man. I mean, I never expected this. We were just in total shock. Yeah. The kids were real friendly. Everybody here loved the kids. Swam here at his house regularly. They played with my dog.
Like we have families down here that, they work, and he'd come over and mow their lawns and take care of the family. Anything he needed, he'd be there for you.
Jonathan Candy was a 42-year-old man from Yukon, Oklahoma. He worked as a part-time employee at the Paycom Center, one of Yukon's large arenas used to hold various events like concerts and sports tournaments. It was another basketball season, and Jonathan Candy had been spending some time working on the recent NBA games. It was the home game for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and everyone in the area was excited to see the trophy come home. Although he just worked part-time, his jokes and laughs always brought life to the arena. Jonathan Candy studied at Bishop McGuinness Catholic High School, and after he graduated, he married his sweetheart, Lindsay Terry. Lindsay grew up in Prague, Oklahoma. She was a member of the choir as a young girl, and she was always full of laughter. Jonathan Candy was the funny, goofy guy who loved to make jokes and make everyone laugh. And Lindsay Terry was the beautiful young lady who loved to laugh and was eventually swept off her feet by this goofy guy's charm and jokes. Their marriage seemed to go on smoothly. Even after many years of marriage and 4 sons, Jonathan and Lindsay Candy looked happily married. There was never any report of possible domestic violence or abuse of any sort. Their children also looked happy and lived like the average American kid. The Facebook page of the couple is filled with family photos of happy times, and anyone scrolling by would believe they were a regular, happy family. Jonathan always told his relatives and friends about how his family and children were his entire world. But then, on April 22nd, something no one could have thought or imagined occurred. The name of the Jonathan's family youngest son has been withheld for privacy reasons. But what we do know is that this little boy stepped out of his room on April 22nd, 2024, and he was expecting it to be like any other day. He didn't expect anything unusual. He slept through the night with a box fan blowing in his direction, so he couldn't have heard anything going on outside. The only thing he remembered hearing was the fire alarm that went off during the night, but he went soundly back to sleep right after that. At around 9 a.m., he stepped out of his room only to find his entire family in a pool of blood. At 9:30 a.m. on April 22nd, 2024, the 10-year-old boy called 911 and told the dispatcher that he found his entire family dead. Not too long after, the police arrived at the home of the Candy family near Southwest 29th Street and Czech Hall Road. They entered the house and were shocked by what they saw. It was nothing short of a massacre. After their inspection, they saw 39-year-old Lindsay Candy, who had been shot and killed. She was murdered along with her sons, 18-year-old Dylan Candy, 14-year-old Ethan Candy, and 12-year-old Lucas Candy. The suspected killer, 42-year-old Jonathan Candy, was also found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. It didn't take too long to conclude that this was a case of murder-suicide, but the question on everyone's mind: why did this happen? The sole survivor was the 10-year-old who made the call to 911. Neighbors on Czech Hall Road noticed as ambulance and police vehicles began to pull up into their neighbor's home. They were confused as to what might have occurred. After some time of investigation, it was revealed that the father, Jonathan Candy, allegedly hunted down and killed his wife and children one by one, except for the youngest son. An interview with Oklahoma officials revealed that 2 of the victims' bodies were found upstairs, and the other 2 were found downstairs. There were no signs of a struggle at the crime scene, which adds more confusion to what went down. In most cases like this one, it is unusual for the killer to spare just one person and kill everyone himself. If the intention was murder-suicide, everyone present is usually a casualty. What could have occurred? Why did Jonathan Candy decide to spare the youngest son? Is it possible he came to his senses last minute? Or did he have a special relationship with this child? Unfortunately, these questions might remain unanswered because there's no one to ask these questions to. The relatives of the Candy family realize how hard this would be on the young boy, and they think it's best to leave him out of any further investigations in the meantime. Till then, this case would remain a mystery. One of the officials in charge of the investigation, Dr. Joni Johnston, a clinical and forensic psychologist, said that the entire scenario was shocking to her. She has never witnessed a case where a parent murders some of the children and lets just one live. Friends and neighbors who saw Jonathan before the murders said everything seemed just fine to them. There was nothing unusual or out of place. Jonathan's colleagues specifically mentioned that he was at the Thunder Pelicans playoff game just hours before the tragic murders occurred. Nobody is sure if there are any warning signs that the people around the family should have picked up on. There was no sign of domestic violence, which is usually a common factor in murder-suicide cases. Up till now, no one can state or rightly speculate the motive behind the murders. All we know is that there was possibly an altercation between Jonathan and Lindsay on the night of the murders. No one knows what their argument could have been about, and why Jonathan decided that the best way to deal with the situation was to kill his wife and systemically hunt down and kill 3 of his kids. He seemed like a loving and supportive father. But what would make a father put a bullet through some of the people he claimed to love the most in the world?
But something may have happened. He kills his wife and several of his kids, and then just decides to kill himself, kind of to get out of it.
One possibility, I mean, there's so many possibilities, and I think one of them that I've thought about is it's possible that he kills his wife in the heat of some altercation. They're having some argument, and he, for whatever reason, just loses it, shoots her several times, kills her, and that is not premeditated. And there is no history of depression or those things that we're talking about. And then starts thinking that I can't leave my kids to face this. You know, I could not bear the thought of my children knowing that that I murdered their mother, their father is a murderer, or I'm going to kill myself, and I can't bear the thought of my kids being left with no parents.
Ongoing investigations are trying to find out if there were any form of financial crises that the family was going through. Sometimes, financial crises in homes can lead to depression, particularly to the man who might feel the weight of the burden on his shoulders. This could result in distorted thinking and increase the chances of feeling like there's no hope and no help. Another factor investigators are considering is whether Jonathan had any form of mental health challenge that he was so good at hiding and didn't share with anyone. There's still a form of stigma around seeking help for mental health challenges, and those who don't end up seeking help usually end up making terrible mistakes that could affect their lives and the lives of those they love. Signs of depression in men are usually different from that in women. Men might not be able to mentally process well or vocally express their feelings of depression, so what they do oftentimes is to isolate themselves, and then they become irritable and edgy and express anger instead of showing sadness. Families, friends, and loved ones around them might not understand that these might be signs of depression and that the person might have suicidal tendencies. It's quite unfortunate when people don't seek help for mental health issues on time because when they enter a certain stage of depression, they lose all hope in the world and believe the best thing they can do is kill themselves and take other people with them. The actual motive behind the murders is not known, so for now, this remains a mystery to everyone. On Lindsay Candy's Facebook page, one of her childhood friends, Connie Cruz, upon hearing the news, shared some details about the friendship between her and Lindsay. She said that Lindsay and she were both choristers in church when growing up, and that they sang side by side with each other in the choir. She also mentioned that she and Lindsay attended school together until they both graduated in 2002. A particular memory Connie Cruz shared helped everyone see the bright and playful nature Lindsay had. She said that as young girls, she and Lindsay hid in a treehouse and fell asleep there. Their parents couldn't find them, became worried, and called the police. At the end of the day, everyone laughed about the situation, stating how the girls gave them a fright of their lives, only to be found asleep in a treehouse. Cruz also mentioned that she and Lindsay had a friendship they could always pick up from where it left off. She stated how devastated she had been after hearing the news of the Candy family's death. She has been unable to imagine or process the entire thing. Cruz said on the Facebook page that Lindsay was so loved and special to many people. She specifically stated how fiercely loved Lindsay was by her boys, and how she brought laughter to every conversation, and the lives of her parents, her sister, and their girl group. Dylan Candy was the first son of Jonathan and Lindsay Candy. He was a social person who didn't find it hard to make friends, and it was obvious to everyone that he had a passion for drumming and music in general. Just last year, in May 2023, he graduated from Mustang High School. He loved playing in the marching band, and he attended Oklahoma Baptist University during the semester in fall to join the Bison Brigade. The Bison Brigade was OBU's marching band, and Dylan played their first bass drum. The director of athletic bands at OBU, Brian Stackhouse, mentioned that the only reason Dylan wasn't leading any section in the band was because he was a freshman, but he was placed in the position to play the complex first bass because he was good at playing in the band. Brian Stackhouse said Dylan was an amazing young man who had a big heart. He described Dylan as someone happy at all times and who was always friendly to everyone, regardless of if he was having a rough day. He was an excellent example to his peers on what it means to dedicate yourself to the team, how to work through hard situations, how to persevere, keep on showing up, and give it your absolute best. Stackhouse recalled that a core memory he had of Dylan was during band camp when he was told that he had a solo in the drum line. Dylan was so happy that he couldn't sit in one place, and he just went on with his day with so much excitement. Dylan's bandmates were encouraged to support one another as they dealt with the devastating news of his death. Dylan's bass drum and uniform would be set up as a memorial display to honor him and his family. 14-year-old Ethan Candy was the second son of the Candy family. He was a 9th grade student at Mustang North Middle School, and everyone in school knew him as this active, athletic young boy who was good at baseball. Ethan's coach said he was a very energetic and committed player who had a natural talent for the game and always played with so much gladness and intensity. He said Ethan had an inspiring spirit and a smile that could lighten people's mood. His coach, T.J. Armstrong, was quite fond of Ethan. He was best friends with his son, and he believed he brought out the best in his son. He would usually call him Sweet Candy Man. Cooper Armstrong and Wyatt Livesey, Ethan's best friends, as well as his other friends, have been unable to fully process the loss of Ethan. A memorial bench is being set up at the Mustang Youth Sports Complex to honor his presence in their lives and the team. Lucas Candy was the youngest victim of the murders. He was 12 years old and was a student at Meadowbrook Intermediate. He was always seen playing around with the other young children during Ethan's soccer practice. He was full of life and was an active, smart kid. He would be remembered as a bright, joyful kid who loved to play outdoors and make new friends. One of the saddest parts of this tragic story is the fact that the youngest child and sole survivor of the Candy family would have to grow up knowing that his entire family was murdered by his father. At 10 years old, he's already set to face a future where he grows up without his immediate family. No dad, no mom, no siblings. In just one night, his entire life changed, and those whom he called family were no more. He might grow up needing closure of what happened, and sadly, might not be able to find an answer. This is a burden too heavy to be placed on a 10-year-old child with his entire future ahead of him. He has been placed in the care of extended family members, and people in the community are coming together to show him as much support as possible to help him deal with this difficult reality. Social workers have been assigned to work closely with the family to make sure he receives every necessary emotional and psychological support. A GoFundMe has been set up for him, and people have been encouraged to give as much as they can to assist with his upkeep, education, and future needs. The support that has been received so far from the community has been very heartwarming and overwhelming, proving to the only surviving Candy son and their other family members that they are not alone in these painful times. No one ever saw this coming. This is one reason why the news is so shocking to those who knew the family. At the local station KF, Jonathan's family released a statement where they expressed how truly confused and devastated they were. They said they have so many questions they won't ever have answers to. One of Candy's family neighbors, 68-year-old Michael Burcham, said that it's hard for him to believe that his neighbors are no more and that he already misses them. Another neighbor, Brian Graham, mentioned how handy and helpful Jonathan was around the neighborhood. T.J. Armstrong, Ethan's coach, said he chooses to remember Jonathan Candy as that great guy he always knew him as. Someone who was always thankful and was always giving hugs. His wife, Rhonda Armstrong, who had known the Candy family for over 3 years, said that whenever she went to their house or they came over, she never could stop smiling and laughing. They could make her forget about her bad day at work or her life struggles the moment she saw their smiles. She said Lindsay was always at Ethan's baseball game, with the loudest cheer as they played the games. Everyone who knew them saw them as a kind, sweet, and happy family, which made the idea of what happened to them even harder to believe. Investigators are trying to do a thorough search to find clues of whatever might have led up to Jonathan's drastic actions. They are trying to examine his interactions with friends and family to identify any possibility of a poor mental state. But because there have been no previous pointers to poor mental health, it has been particularly frustrating to figure out a clear motive behind his actions. However, authorities are using this incident as an avenue to inform people about the importance of seeking help in any case of mental health issues. They emphasize the fact that there is a need to break every stigma connected with seeking help. Jonathan Candy's case just goes further to show how those who seem happy and all right on the outside could be dealing with some deep inner trauma. Everyone is going through one thing or the other, so we need to learn to be compassionate with people we meet and take some time to connect and talk to our family and friends to ensure there is no buildup of negative emotion. Authorities have offered to help people who might be struggling to process their emotions or the news of Candy's family death by giving them access to support groups and counseling services. This seems like an absolute nightmare. Everyone wishes they would just wake up from. The Candy family were loved by many and would forever be dear in their hearts. As family and friends grieve the death of Jonathan, Lindsay, Dylan, Ethan, and Lucas Candy, they also realize that the priority at a time like this is to ensure the survivor of the Candy family receives as much support and love as possible. The next case we'll be looking at is the Powell family massacre. Josh Powell often claimed he was a devoted father, always putting his children first. "I love my sons more than anything. I put them and my family first," he said in an interview. But within months, those words turned out to be completely in vain. Despite all his claims, Josh was not the loving husband he pretended to be. Struggling with uncontrollable spending, he had accumulated over $200,000 in debt and had grown increasingly possessive of his wife, even threatening to flee the country if she ever tried to leave him. This isn't a story of love. It's one of obsession, betrayal, and heartbreak. This is the story of Josh Powell. Our love and respect goes out to Susan, Charlie, Braden, all those who knew and loved the victims, and all those affected by this case. The story of Susan Cox and Josh Powell began like many others. Both were devout members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and met in November 2000 at a dinner party at Josh's apartment. The two were already classmates in a religion course. Their relationship progressed quickly, and they married 6 months later at the Portland, Oregon temple. At the time, Josh was job hopping while Susan left her job as a cosmetologist to work as a broker at Wells Fargo. To support Josh's dreams of becoming a real estate agent, Susan also got her realtor's license to help him in his career, as she truly believed in their future together. In 2005, the Powells welcomed their first son, Charlie, followed by their second son, Braden, 2 years later. Susan hoped their children would strengthen the family bond, but their marriage had already begun to crumble. Josh struggled to hold a steady job, which led to a bankruptcy filing in 2008, and this only made things worse. It eventually reached the point where the two started to hate each other, and this prompted Susan to document their struggles in journals and videotape their belongings as she feared a contentious divorce.
It is 12:33 Mountain Time. Covering all my bases, making sure that if something happens to me or my family or all of us, that our assets are documented. Hope everything works out and we're all happy and live happily ever after as much as that's possible.
She even feared for her safety, as she wrote if she died, it might not be an accident. Josh's upbringing was very dysfunctional. His parents, Stephen and Terica Powell, had a tumultuous marriage that ended in divorce in 1992. According to Terica, Stephen was very harsh towards Josh, and he would verbally and physically abuse him. Josh even attempted suicide as a teenager. His parents' divorce involved accusations of mental unfitness, pornography, polygamy, and witchcraft. with both parents making severe allegations against each other. Stephen, who had a deep-seated hate for the LDS Church and adopted extremist views, influenced his sons with his radical beliefs and contempt for women. Terica's family described him as anti-church, anti-country, anti-authority, anti-morality, and accused him of teaching his sons to mock and insult their mother. This toxic environment left a lasting mark on Josh, who displayed alarming behavior such as threatening his mother with a butcher knife and killing his sister's pet gerbil. The Powell children were deeply traumatized by their upbringing, as they constantly had to move between parents and grandparents all the time. And eventually, Josh started to get violent. His father's influence, characterized by erratic and explosive behavior, left Josh with deep psychological scars. Jennifer Powell Graves, Josh's sister, recounted a chilling conversation with their father about men who stalk and kill their former lovers. And one day, the unthinkable happened. As Christmas 2009 approached, the Powell marriage was at its lowest point. But Josh's wife, Susan, still believed her husband might have been changing for the better. On December 6th, Susan attended church with Charlie and Braden at the Hunter 36th Ward, then walked home with a friend. That afternoon, neighbor Giovanna Owings visited Susan to help untangle yarn for a blanket Susan was crocheting for Charlie. Josh offered Owings dinner but did not invite her children, claiming there wasn't enough food for everyone. As the women worked on the yarn, the boys helped Josh in the kitchen. A half-decorated Christmas tree stood in the living room, with presents for the kids underneath. Susan had been waiting for Josh to bring the rest of the decorations from the garage. Although Josh was drifting from the church, Susan was increasingly involved and had saved money for tithing against Josh's wishes. She mentioned to Owings that they had been doing marriage counseling through the church, but Josh had stopped participating and wasn't reading their assigned marriage book. Owings was nervous discussing the marriage while Josh was there, as Josh tended to dominate conversations. During the visit, Susan felt cold, and Josh brought her a blanket, impressing Owings with the gesture. When dinner was ready, Josh served Owings and Susan on the love seat and ate with the boys at the kitchen table. Owings noticed a change in Josh's behavior, finding him a bit more easygoing. Around 5 p.m., Susan decided to nap, likely due to exhaustion from a recent miscarriage and an ear infection. Owings left around 5:30 p.m. as Josh prepared the boys for sledding. Another neighbor saw Josh return with the boys around 8:30 p.m. At 12:30 a.m., Josh claimed he took the boys camping at Simpson Springs Campground, leaving Susan asleep at home. The weather was snowy and frigid, with sub-zero temperatures that night. By the next morning, the Powell's daycare provider grew concerned when Charlie and Braden were not dropped off on schedule. She couldn't reach Josh or Susan and called Josh's mother and sister, who then called the police. Officers broke into the Powell home, but found no one inside. Instead, they discovered 2 large fans blowing on a wet spot on the carpet. Josh finally answered his cell phone that evening and was told that the police were waiting for him. He was taken to the West Valley Police Station for questioning, where he nervously told a suspicious story about the camping trip.
And your children are telling our detectives that Mom went with you guys last night and that she didn't come back.
She did not go with us.
Okay.
Little Charlie also mentioned the trip, but police found no evidence at the recreation area due to fresh snow. Susan's personal items, including her purse and cell phone, were found in the house, indicating she did not leave at her own will. On December 10th, Josh and the boys, along with neighbors and friends, gathered at Westview Park for a candlelight vigil. They distributed flyers and prayed for Susan's safe return, with Josh shedding a few tears for the cameras, though many found his display fake. But there was another person who was as suspicious as Josh, Stephen Powell. Stephen Powell's disturbing obsession with his daughter-in-law, Susan, showed his view of women as objects of his desire. Even as he served a prison sentence for voyeurism,
In 2009, Stephen was released from prison last July after serving time for child pornography.
He'd also been convicted of voyeurism.
Stephen's writings revealed his continued fixation on Susan. He described his overwhelming lust for her, detailing how he secretly filmed her and indulged in disturbing acts with her personal belongings.
That's Susan. There's Josh. Standing with her, but I really want her. I wish she would look my way. She was so pretty today when she came over to the house. Wish the lighting was better.
His writings displayed a lack of empathy or remorse, and he portrayed his actions as expressions of love rather than violations of Susan's privacy and dignity. Stephen's public statements, including an infamous ABC News interview where he claimed to have had sex with Susan, further underscored his lack of remorse or understanding of the gravity of his actions.
You know, she had a cold, and I offered to rub her feet, to rub her toes, to give her some stimulation. Started massaging her legs. I would have loved to go all the way up her legs, but I did do her calves because her feet were resting in my crotch, so I sort of rubbed her calves.
The investigation into Susan's disappearance uncovered a chilling collection of Susan's personal items in Stephen's possession as little trophies. What makes it worse is that when Susan confided in Josh about it, Josh would defend his father, as he seemed okay with his father's behavior. Despite Josh and Susan's relocation to Utah in an attempt to distance themselves from Stephen, his obsession persisted until the end. His final journal entries expressed his devastation at the thought of Susan's death, and he professed his so-called love for her. As the search for Susan intensified, her family reached out to the public through press conferences, hoping for any information that could help find her. Additionally, an anonymous donor offered a $10,000 reward. Josh's actions drew suspicion as police found out he had driven his rental car hundreds of miles and searched his family's minivan and home multiple times. In late December, Josh stopped cooperating with the police and decided to hire a lawyer instead. Why did he change his behavior all of a sudden? Police searched through Josh's media interviews, hoping to uncover any clues in his demeanor and tone. His indifferent and suspicious attitude during these interviews, which raised doubts about his innocence even further. In January 2010, just a month after Susan disappeared, Josh packed up his belongings and prepared to move back to Washington State with his sons. He had the help of friends and neighbors to load a moving van and trailer, prompting skepticism about his intentions. Josh's credibility took another hit on February 26, 2010, when he and his father launched SusanPowell.org. This action sparked a feud between the Powell and Cox families, with the website being used more for the Powells to defend themselves than to find Susan. In December of the previous year, Josh accused Susan of having a double life and plotting to divorce him. He even linked her to another missing person case, that of Stephen Kuchar. Just when interest in Susan's case seemed to wane, a judge issued a warrant to search Josh's home in Puyallup, Washington, where he lived with his sons and father. This warrant followed Stephen Powell's disturbing interview with ABC News, where he made shocking claims about his relationship with Susan. But Josh Powell's biggest concern wasn't the police or the investigators. It was his own sons, Charlie and Braden. He hoped they were too young to understand or remember what happened to their mom, Susan. In Josh's version of events, he claimed Susan stayed home while he took the boys camping. But Charlie, the oldest, didn't support his dad's story. He told investigators they went camping with both their parents, but when it was time to leave, Mommy didn't come back from where the crystals grew.
Stayed at the park. Where did she stay at the park? Do you know where?
She stayed at the National Park.
Do you know where at the park? No?
No. My mom stayed where a crystals are.
As a result, Charlie and Braden were taken from Josh's care and placed with Susan's parents. They became more vocal about what happened during that strange camping trip with Charlie, even drawing a picture showing Mommy in the trunk of the family minivan. Living with Susan's parents gave the boys a sense of safety, and they began to share more about what they remembered. Anne Bremner, the Cox family's attorney, noted that while the boys were still young, each time they spoke, a clearer picture of that night emerged. Josh realized his sons posed a serious threat to him. Despite being seen as a weird but decent father by many, he was unwilling to let his own children implicate him in their mother's disappearance. But the kids weren't the only ones who talked. An employee at a local Flying J gas station claimed she saw the Powell family on the night Susan disappeared. In the middle of a fierce winter storm, a minivan rolled into the gas station parking lot. Out stepped Josh, Susan, Charlie, and Braden. The clerk, known only as Denise, found it strange to see them there at that hour in such bad weather. A man, later recognized as Josh, came in holding a toddler while chasing after another young boy, calling him Charlie. He was wearing a leather jacket and had a dark goatee. The woman, whom Denise later identified as Susan, looked well-dressed for someone about to go camping. Denise noticed she had red eyes like she'd been crying. The couple bought rescue tape, crackers, and licorice at the register. The man told a little boy, waiting by the door, "Hang on a minute. Let me buy this and then we'll go camping." Denise found the whole situation odd. Who goes camping in the middle of the night, especially in a snowstorm, and in a minivan? Shouldn't they have been in an RV or an SUV? They paid in cash, topped off the gas tank, and then vanished. Weeks later, Denise recognized their faces on the news, but unfortunately, there was no way to confirm her account as they left no paper trail, and the gas station had already taped over its surveillance footage. On February 5, 2012, Charlie and Braden Powell were supposed to visit their dad, Josh. When their caseworker, Elizabeth Griffin Hall, arrived at Josh's house, the boys got out of the car excitedly. They seemed happy to see their dad, according to Griffin Hall. As they approached the house, Josh abruptly shut the door before Griffin Hall could enter. She found his behavior strange, especially given his status as a suspect in Susan's disappearance. Griffin Hall tried to get Josh to open the door, but he ignored her. From outside, she heard him saying something about a surprise for Charlie, followed by Braden crying. This worried Griffin Hall because, although Josh often surprised his sons, something felt off this time.
Did the door open? Did you see Josh?
I saw Josh. I saw Josh for just 1 second. His eyes caught mine, and he had a look in his eyes. It was just kind of sheepish. And then he slammed the door. As soon as the door closed, I heard him say, "Charlie, I've got a big surprise for you." And then I heard Braden cry out. And so I knocked and I knocked and I rang the doorbell and I started yelling at Josh, "Let me in."
As she stood there, Griffin Hall noticed the smell of gasoline coming from the house. Panicked, she ran to her car to call 911. The dispatcher, Dave Lovrek, didn't fully grasp the urgency of the situation, despite Griffin Hall's pleas. He asked for trivial details and didn't realize the seriousness until later.
Okay, how long will it be? I don't know, ma'am. They have to respond to emergency, life-threatening situations first. The first available deputy. Well, this could be life-threatening.
So you're telling the 911 dispatcher this is an emergency. This is a big deal. They're kids, and what are you getting from the other side?
I'm getting, how can you be, who's your supervisor?
I've got the kids in the house and he won't let me in. Whose house is it? Josh Powell. And who's supervising? And he's the husband that I supervise. So you supervise and you're doing the visit? Yeah, I supervise yourself?
I'm not getting an emergency response. They're not responding to me at the level that I'm telling them that I could smell the gas. I can smell the gas, I told.
By the time Griffin Hall's call was taken seriously, it was too late. An explosion engulfed the house, killing Josh, Charlie, and Braden. It took around 22 minutes for help to arrive, but by then, the tragedy had already occurred. Josh's decision to end his own life and the lives of his children wasn't a sudden impulse. It had been brewing for weeks, maybe even months. Before Charlie and Braden arrived on February 5th, Josh gave away their toys and books. He also collected gallons of gasoline, preparing for what he had planned. Moments before his sons arrived, Josh sat at his computer and wrote farewell messages to loved ones, explaining his decision. He expressed his inability to live without his boys and apologized for any hurt he had caused. But there was a dark side to Josh's actions. His plan to kill Charlie and Braden showed anger and bitterness. He didn't even make sure their suffering was minimized before setting the house on fire. Autopsies revealed that the boys died from carbon monoxide poisoning, with chopping injuries as a secondary cause. Josh had attacked them with a hatchet and caused serious wounds before igniting the fire. The boys suffered unimaginable pain and fear in their last moments, betrayed by the one person they trusted the most. Initially, when Josh was told to take a polygraph test and a psychosexual evaluation, the reasons behind it weren't disclosed. However, after the tragic fire, it came to light that investigators had discovered disturbing images on his computer's hard drive, including incestuous drawings. Shockingly, these images weren't shared with all parties involved, including the Cox family's lawyer. If they had been aware, the Coxes could have taken steps to prevent Josh from seeing Charlie and Braden. Even more distressing was the revelation that Josh had sexually abused his own sons before their deaths. Authors Greg Olson and Rebecca Morris uncovered evidence of this abuse based on interviews with family and friends. According to their findings, during their time with Susan's parents, Charlie and Braden refused to wear pajamas, claiming, "Daddy said it was okay to sleep naked." Charlie even confided to Chuck that he and his brother slept in bed with Josh. Later, one of the brothers drew a troubling picture with the words, "Don't play with me," next to an adult and a child. Additionally, when removed from Josh's custody, Braden was diagnosed with a fungal skin infection, which can often result from sexual contact. Friends of Susan Powell suspected Josh of poisoning her in October 2009, just 2 months before her disappearance. Susan had been feeling nauseous and suspected she might be pregnant, which was later confirmed, but unfortunately she miscarried. According to her friend Amber Hardman, Josh prepared various organic concoctions for Susan to drink, including thick yogurt and fermented kefir drinks. While Susan hoped to have another child, Josh didn't share her enthusiasm. Steve Powell, in an interview with the police, mentioned that Susan wanted another baby, but Josh was practicing safe sex. Although there's no concrete evidence, Dave Cawley, the host of the Cold podcast focusing on the Powell family, speculates that Josh may have poisoned Susan the day before she disappeared. Josh rarely cooked, and Susan felt unwell and needed to rest after eating, as recalled by Giovanna Owings. Cawley's theory suggests that Josh might have crushed pills into the pancake batter and then used a tool to harm Susan before hiding her body and putting it in the minivan's trunk. But this theory contradicts Charlie's statements about Susan being with them on the camping trip, as well as the account from the Flying J employee who claimed to have seen the Powell family on the night of the camping trip. Josh Powell's reputation as a self-centered know-it-all who dominated conversations was well known among those who knew him. Former neighbor John Hallowell described the dynamic, saying, "We all love Susan and we tolerate Josh because he comes along. It's part of the package. That's how most people felt. She was always worrying about other people, where Josh was always the opposite. He was only ever concerned about himself, which made things sometimes a little difficult." As more details emerged about Josh's behavior, friends, family, and neighbors shared their experiences with the man believed to be responsible for his wife's disappearance and the tragic deaths of his sons. During Susan's labor with their first son, Charlie, Josh prioritized backing up his computer over taking her to the hospital, making Susan's parents drive her instead. Even when he finally arrived at the hospital, he sat working on his laptop until he was told to be with his wife. Josh exerted tight control over the household to the point where Susan had to ask for permission to drive, and he would monitor their finances. He even went as far as forcing Susan to knit socks instead of buying new ones, and limited how much their children could eat. According to Susan's friend Rachel Marini, Josh once callously remarked about Charlie's meals, saying, "He gets 1 meal a day at daycare. That's all he needs. You're not wasting my food on him because he's just going to poop it out." This attitude led to Charlie being diagnosed with malnutrition at just a year old. Josh's control extended to Susan's mobility, as he banned her from having a cell phone and forced her to ride a bicycle to work. He even restricted her showers to save money, despite indulging in gambling at a local casino himself. What happened to the Powell family seemed to compound with the death of Josh's brother, Michael Powell, who jumped to his death from a building in downtown Minneapolis in February 2013. Michael, who was considered the more stable member of the Powell family, had a promising future. He was pursuing a doctoral degree in cognitive science at the University of Minnesota and had served in the U.S. Army before that. Despite his promising career and academic pursuits, Michael fiercely defended Josh and their father, even against serious accusations. He firmly denied law enforcement's charges against his father and dismissed them as lies made up to damage the Powell family's reputation. Michael was also entangled in a legal battle with Chuck and Judy Cox over insurance policies worth $1.5 million, which Josh had changed to list Michael as the primary beneficiary just months before the murder-suicide. But Michael's loyalty to Josh was filled with deceit and questionable actions. He repeatedly lied under oath about his involvement in Susan's disappearance, including hiding a Facebook account used to spy on search efforts for her body. Suspicion grew when it was discovered that Michael had his broken-down car towed to a salvage yard shortly after Susan went missing. Although forensic testing showed inconclusive results, the presence of human decomposition indicated by a sniffer dog raised eyebrows. Utah police suspected that Michael may have helped Josh in disposing of Susan's body, but didn't have enough evidence to press charges. Michael's death only added to the sorrow and mystery surrounding the Powell family, leaving behind unresolved questions and pain. The deaths of Charlie and Braden Powell, at the hands of their own father, Josh Powell, led to questions about the role of Washington's Department of Social and Health Services in allowing them access to their father. The Cox family, Susan Powell's parents, filed a lawsuit against the DSHS alleging negligence and seeking damages for the suffering endured by the boys. Initially dismissed in 2015, the lawsuit was revived by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in 2019, allowing it to proceed to trial. The trial, which began in February 2020, had disturbing details, including evidence of Susan's blood near a recently cleaned sofa and Josh's quick actions to withdraw her retirement account funds after her disappearance. The DSHS argued that prior to the murders, there wasn't enough evidence to keep Josh away from his children completely and cited strict guidelines and limitations on their authority. But the Coxes believed that the agency should have recognized the danger Josh posed to his children, especially given his status as the primary person of interest in Susan's disappearance. The decision to proceed to trial was based on concerns that DSHS allowed Josh too much control over the children's visitation and failed to heed warnings from police detectives, family members, and the boys' counselor about the potential danger they faced. To this day, Susan Powell's case remains unsolved. Stephen Powell was considered a person of interest, but was never charged in connection with her disappearance. He died in 2018 while he was serving time for child pornography and voyeurism. In 2020, Washington State awarded Susan's parents $98 million for negligence related to the deaths of their grandchildren.
Court is reconvened.
Has the jury reached a verdict, ma'am?
If it pleases the court, we have.
Was the state of Washington negligent? Answer, yes. What do you find plaintiff Charles Powell's total amount of damages? $57,500,000. Braden Powell's total amount of damages, $57,500,000.
The last case we'll be looking at is the Hawe family massacre. On the morning of August 29, 2016, Mary Call became concerned when her daughter Clodagh didn't drop off her two youngest sons, Niall and Ryan, as planned. Unable to reach her or her husband Alan on their phones or receive responses to her texts, Mary then drove to their home at Oakdean Downs in Barkany. Upon arrival, she noticed both family cars in the driveway and closed curtains in the sitting room and bedrooms, which immediately raised alarm bells for her. It wasn't like Clodagh to not contact her if she was running late. At first, Mary Cole feared her daughter Clodagh and her grandchildren might have fallen victim to carbon monoxide poisoning. When she approached the back door with her key, she saw a note taped to the inside which ordered not to enter and to call the police. Recognizing Alan's handwriting on the note, Mary became deeply suspicious that something terrible had happened. She immediately called emergency services at approximately 10:40 a.m. and then sought out her neighbor, Edith Harrigan, informing her that Alan had likely done something to her daughter.
On 29th August 2016, we lost our daughter and sister Clodagh and her lovely sons Liam, Niall and Ryan in the most horrific circumstances.
This is the case of the Hawe family. Our love and respect goes out to all those who knew and loved the victims of the Hawe family and all those affected by this case. Alan and Clodagh Hawe were both educators deeply involved in their local communities. Alan Hawe, originally from Windgap in County Kilkenny, was a deputy principal at Castle Rahan National School near Barcony, where the family lived. Clodagh Hawe, formerly Clodagh Call, came from Mount Nugent, a village in the southern part of County Cavan, not far from Ballymamesduff. She worked as a teacher at Orristown National School, which is located southeast of Kells in County Meath. They had 3 sons, 13-year-old Liam, 11-year-old Niall, and 6-year-old Ryan. The previous evening, everything seemed normal to Mary. They enjoyed tea, biscuits, and conversation in the kitchen while their 3 sons watched television in the sitting room. Clodagh mentioned plans to drop off Niall and Ryan at Mary's house early the next morning, as Liam had school. She assured Mary not to worry if she was a bit late, as Clodagh did not have students to attend to that day. Before leaving, Mary wished Alan luck as he prepared to return to school after the summer break. Alan thanked her for the treats, referring to the biscuits she had offered them. Little did Mary know that this would be the last time she would see Alan alive. The next morning, when Mary became alarmed at not hearing from Clodagh and attempted to reach her without success, she drove to the Hawe family home in Berconey. Discovering the note on the back door and recognizing Alan's handwriting, she immediately called the police. Officer Alan Ratcliffe arrived and, using Mary's key, entered the house. Inside, he found Clodagh Hawe's lifeless body on the couch in the sitting room, dressed in pajamas with severe head injuries. A knife and a small axe were found nearby on the floor. Alan Hawe's body was discovered in the hallway. He took his own life. Moving upstairs, Garda Ratcliffe found Liam and Niall Hawe in separate bedrooms, both with throat injuries indicative of their tragic deaths. In another bedroom, he found Ryan Hawe, also deceased, with a knife placed on his pillow. The master bedroom contained neatly arranged jewelry and jewelry boxes on the bed. Garda Ratcliffe informed his colleague about the 5 bodies inside the house, then joined her and Mary Call outside the property, where Mary was waiting anxiously. Garda Alan Ratcliffe informed Mary Call that he found no survivors inside the house when he arrived. The detectives also found various items, including documents, a sealed envelope containing a letter, and a note on the kitchen table. Some of these items were stained with blood. It was later discovered that Alan Hawe's right palm print was identified on the blood-stained hatchet found at the scene. The letter inside the envelope was written by Alan after he murdered Clodagh while their sons were asleep. The victim's family, who were withheld the note by Irish police, known as Gardaí, for 16 months, believe Alan Hawe wrote it in 2 parts, starting after murdering his wife and finishing after killing his sons. Hawe began his spree by murdering his wife Clodagh as she sat on the couch in their sitting room using an axe he kept in the shed. He then sat at the kitchen table to write his murder-suicide letter, sealing it in an envelope. Next, he took a kitchen knife and walked upstairs to attack his 3 sleeping sons. After killing them, he returned to add more words to the outside of the envelope. During the investigation, it was discovered that Alan Hawe had planned his actions meticulously. He retrieved the axe from the shed and moved furniture so that Clodagh would have her back turned as he entered the sitting room. At that moment, Clodagh was innocently browsing holidays online and having tea. Alan approached from behind and brutally attacked her with the axe, stabbing her in the back and nearly severing her hand as she tried to defend herself. After murdering Clodagh, Alan sat down to write the letter, leaving the axe and knife on the floor. He then made his way upstairs with a new knife. He knelt on Liam's chest and cut his windpipe to prevent him from screaming. Niall, sharing the room with Liam, likely didn't wake up immediately due to Liam's inability to make noise, but he had defensive wounds on his hands. Alan repeated the same brutal act with Niall before moving to Ryan's room. Ryan, the youngest and smallest of the 3 boys, was subjected to a particularly cruel and violent attack. According to the testimony given during the investigation, Hawe used a sawing motion on Ryan before covering all of them with a duvet and leaving the knife he used on Ryan's pillow. Afterward, he returned downstairs to write more, transferred money, and organized paperwork while his family lay dead around him. Hawe transferred 2,500 euros from the joint account to his own in the early hours of the morning after the killings. Reflecting on the immediate aftermath, Jacqueline and her mother Mary Call expressed their dismay at the lack of initial support they received. They recalled how on the Monday following the murders, they struggled to reach out to people for help and information, finding themselves informed more by media reports than by official sources.
The person approached me. They lived in the locality of where Clodagh and the boys lived, and they said to me that they had seen Alan Hawe the morning after the murders, around 6:30 that morning, on the way to the direction of the school in the family car, and that person had made a statement to the guards saying that they had seen him, and they told me what guard they'd given the statement to and where they'd given the statement, and had given me a lot of information around it. And we just want to know, is that true? When we meet Drew Harris, we're going to raise the access to the Garda files. We'd like to see statements and who made statements, and we would like to raise issues that we experienced as a family. We would like to see changes in the Succession Act 1965, but at present we feel there's no legitimate reason for it to be stalled, considering the families that have been affected in this country.
Finally, we would like to thank everybody all over the country who has shown us such support in this last number of days. We now know that Clodagh, Liam, Niall and Ryan are finally getting the respect that they deserve. We are so thankful to everybody. We cannot thank everybody individually, but thank you comes from the bottom of our heart. Her name is Clodagh.
It wasn't until 2 weeks before the inquest, 16 months after the tragedy, that they finally received a copy of Alan's letter. This letter provided chilling insights into Alan's state of mind leading up to the murders, including how he rearranged furniture to carry out his plans. The note began with, "All the good stuff we did, I was really into it. But I think there was some sort of psychosis that made me enjoy that, yet, in the next moment, I was the complete opposite." He continued with an apology for his actions. "I'm sorry for how I murdered them all, but I simply had no other way. I'm sure I've gotten lots of what I wanted to say properly, some badly. I know to many I was so nice to them, but they never knew the real me." He ended with, "God bless you all. Be good to your families. I just don't know what it was that I was so normal yet so dark and no one could see it." At first, the Irish press highlighted Alan Hawe as a highly respected member of the community. He was depicted as the head of a church-going family, the dedicated vice principal of a local national school, an athletics enthusiast, and a former teenage handball champion. He was described as the most normal man you could meet, a brilliant dad, and a kind and decent person with an overriding need to look after those around him. These glowing testimonials painted a picture of Hawe as a caring and well-adjusted family man, making the contrast with his brutal actions all the more shocking. In June 2016, Alan Hawe's carefully constructed facade began to crumble when he was caught viewing pornography on a school computer. It is believed that this incident occurred at the school where he taught. Hawe had accessed 97% of his pornography on his school laptop, and some on his phone, keeping this hidden from his wife, Clodagh. Mary Call, Clodagh's mother, recalled a conversation with Clodagh in February 2016, where Clodagh revealed that Alan had confessed to watching pornography. This admission strained their relationship, which led Hawe to start attending counseling sessions every Tuesday night. Clodagh assured her mother that things were under control, but Mary could sense Clodagh's underlying distress. Hawe's counseling sessions initially focused on his porn addiction, but later shifted to address issues arising at the school. But after this exposure, Hawe's world began to spiral dangerously out of control. Hawe's troubles signified internal struggle. His double life, marked by an appearance of normalcy and an inner turmoil, likely contributed to his psychological decline. But what was his motive? Investigating Gardaí quickly determined that Hawe had no clinical history of mental health issues, nor had he ever been referred to or sought mental health services. In the days leading up to the murders, locals did not notice any signs of change in Hawe's mental state, mood, or behavior. But the absence of obvious indicators does not mean Hawe did not experience severe emotional distress. At the Cavan Coroner's Court, psychiatry professor Harry Kennedy presented his findings based on extensive documentation regarding Alan Hawe's mental health. Professor Kennedy's report was compiled without direct interaction with Mr. Hawe, relying instead on records from Hawe's GP, counselor, and his suicide note. According to Professor Kennedy's assessment, Hawe had been grappling with somatic anxieties since 2008, which involved worries about physical health issues escalating into severe preoccupations. These anxieties were accompanied by ruminations, scruples, and exaggerated feelings of guilt, all indicative of a major depressive illness. Professor Kennedy highlighted that by the time of the murder-suicide, Hawe had transitioned from long-term depression to a severe episode that included psychotic symptoms. He emphasized that severe mental illness significantly impairs judgment, suggesting that Hawe's actions were influenced by this compromised mental state. Hawe had disclosed to his general practitioner about feeling run down, having sleep difficulties, and even treating a toenail problem with bleach. Despite Hawe's mental complaints, his practitioner had only treated him for physical ailments over the 5 years of their patient-doctor relationship. In counseling sessions with David McConnell from March to June 2016, Hawe expressed ongoing troubles and disclosed a history of feeling down in his 20s, which had resolved when he started working. Hawe's goal in therapy was to restore his family life to what it once was, revealing his strong attachment to his role as a father and husband. During their final session on June 21, 2016, Hawe appeared stressed, but candidly shared his emotional struggles. He admitted feeling the pressure of maintaining a perfect image in the community, revealing his fear of shame and imperfection. This session ended on an emotional note, with Hawe breaking down in tears. Throughout their sessions, there were no breaches of confidentiality, and Hawe stopped going to therapy after June 21, 2016. On the same day as his last counseling session, Hawe saw his practitioner for his toenail issue. He mentioned experiencing sleep problems due to a conflict with a colleague at work, which made him feel isolated. Despite these issues, he did not ask for a sick note. The practitioner noted that Hawe was preparing for the end of the school year and looking forward to a holiday in Italy. She prescribed him 10 sleeping pills to address his short-term insomnia and advised him to avoid further work conflict, suggesting he return if his condition did not improve. The practitioner observed that Hawe appeared clear, coherent, focused, and displayed normal behavior with no signs of agitation. She reported no indications of despair or hopelessness, emphasizing that his primary stressor seemed to be the work conflict, and he appeared positive about the upcoming holiday. However, she was unaware that Hawe was also seeing a counselor and had an appointment on the same day. In one section of his note, Alan Hawe wrote, "I cannot let them face a life without me and the shame they would have to bear that their father had committed suicide. I have wanted to kill myself for a long time now, and I just could not bear the thought of leaving my mess and the anger and rejection that Clodagh and the boys would have to live with forever." It is common for suicidal individuals to perceive themselves as burdens to others, believing that their loved ones would be better off without them. Expressions of sympathy were extended to the Call and Hawe families by the police, the coroner, legal representatives, and the jury. The jurors deliberated for about 10 minutes before returning the advised verdicts. For Alan Hawe, the coroner recommended a verdict of self-inflicted death or suicide. Following her guidance, the jury deliberated and returned verdicts in accordance with the coroner's recommendations. The inquest concluded on December 19, 2017. Shortly after the murders, women's rights groups in Ireland, such as Women's Aid and the National Women's Council, criticized the Irish press for what they perceived as an overly sympathetic treatment of Alan Hawe. Clodagh's sister and mother were reportedly left €50,000 in debt due to the legal costs of pursuing the release of documents. They also criticized the lack of support provided by the state and charitable organizations to their family and the families of murder victims in Ireland generally.
They were savagely and brutally killed by Alan Hawe in a premeditated and calculated manner. We are aware that the inquest has a limited role in law in that its function is restricted to establishing how, where and when our loved ones died. However, it is clear from the evidence presented at the inquest that Clodagh and her boys were killed in a sequence that ensured that the eldest and most likely to provide effective resistance were killed first, and that they were executed in a manner which rendered them unable to cry out for help.
The case was reviewed in 2019 following efforts by Cloda's family, amid reports that Alan Hawe had been seen visiting the school where he was employed on the morning of the killings. In 2019, the school where Cloda had been employed unveiled a new hall named in her memory. Do you think there is something that was missed that could have prevented this awful tragedy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more videos like this, please be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more true crime videos. Until next time, bye for now.